India's Foreign Affairs Minister had strong words for Canada in the wake of arrests of 3 Indian nationals for the alleged murder of a Sikh separatist in BC last summer. He accused directly Canada of being the #1 international abettor of the Khalistan movement, a Sikh separatist movement that has existed since the 1980s. This has become a major focus of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who has branded it a serious security threat. With us for more this morning is Rupinder Ladar, a PhD candidate at McGill University, whose research is focusing on South Asian political behavior in Canada. Good morning. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks, Anne-Marie. Thanks for having me.
So we just reiterated the remarks by India's Foreign Affairs Minister about Canada, but they all painted a picture of Canada as a hotbed for the Khalistan movement outside of India. Is he right about that?
Right. Well, I'm not sure about the term hotbed. I would say, statistically speaking, the diaspora is the largest here. And so with the most number of Sikh people living outside of India, right here in Canada, that's potentially why we see the Khalistan movement being so strong. And when we couple that with the fear of expressing one's political, opinions back home in India, that's what we're seeing here.
Our Prime Minister had comments of his own this weekend after the arrests were made in the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar.
Many Canadians, particularly members of the Sikh community, are feeling uneasy and perhaps even frightened right now. Well, every Canadian has the fundamental right to live safely and free from discrimination and threats of violence in Canada.
So we could hear there his very carefully chosen words. It is a tightrope for him to walk. Could the Prime Minister, is there a way that the Prime Minister could condemn the Khalistan movement while still remaining supportive of the Sikh diaspora, or are the two intertwined?
Right. I mean, we have to consider what we mean when we say condemning the movement. This is ultimately a movement about sovereignty. And we know that the current Indian government has a history of labeling anyone that counters or opposes them as terrorists and as criminals. And so when we think about separating the movement really from the community, it's a little bit more difficult. Not all Sikh people support the Khalistan movement, but there is an understanding in the community that one should have the right to express their opinions about Sikh sovereignty. And we have to also remember that demonstrating about homeland politics here in Canada is not something exclusive to the Sikh community. It's something we've seen before.
Yeah, and we have seen this before, which is why it's important to have that part of the conversation, because if it's a movement that you're not familiar with, it is important to have that level of understanding when you're watching political comments on both sides. In December, an Indian national was charged by the U.S. Department of Justice for attempting to assassinate Sikh nationalists on U.S. soil. The indictment alleges that a would-be assassin was hired by the employee of the Indian government. So India said it would cooperate with the U.S., but not with Canada. Why have relations gotten to the point now where Canada and India cannot seem to cooperate on this?
Right. I mean, tensions certainly did escalate and reach that highest point when Prime Minister Trudeau addressed Parliament. He reported on the Five Eyes and Canadian intelligence that linked the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar to the Indian government and to Indian agents. And so really there he was pointing the finger directly at the Indian government, the Modi government. And that is why we see this hostile defensive stance that is being taken about whether there's a different approach that's being taken with Canada versus with the United States. I think with the bold actions taken by India, it's clear to see that they see Canadian sovereignty as something that they can kind of conduct their business on.
But where did this all start? Because we've got 2 prime ministers of countries who, rather than working together on something that they both have concerns about, are blaming each other. So how did we get so far apart? Where did that start?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, it really did start when Prime Minister Trudeau addressed Parliament. And at that point, he was singling out the Indian government. He was singling out the Modi government. And really what we've seen is just an escalation from that point onwards. And it seems to me that more of the story is slowly unraveling and developing. And we'll find out more with these investigations as they are ongoing.
Yeah, and we did see some tensions before that address in Parliament, though, when our Prime Minister was in India. We definitely saw some cold shoulder there. If not through diplomatic channels, then where can we go from here in terms of finding a solution to these tensions?
Right. I mean, the Sikh community is still grieving, and we have to be mindful of the fact that others' lives are still at risk. And so I think what we can do is learn from the mistakes that were made, take these threats very seriously, and ultimately communicate with these diasporic communities. They're in the middle of all of this. They're connected to both nations, and I think bringing in their voices into our policy-making decisions is the way forward. When we saw this with the Foreign Interference Commission. And so I think more efforts like this can help us heal these relations and ultimately protect our most vulnerable communities.
Yeah, and we do that through discussions like the one you and I are having today. Rupinder Lidar, thanks for joining us this morning. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this, be sure to subscribe here, or you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.